All right, so welcome in today. We're going to do an interview for you guys, and it's one of the top 100 tokens out there, and that is Hedera. Hedera, of course, has been doing some interesting things here recently in the news with a new governance council member. Also, obviously, you guys track Hedera mainly because of price action. We're not necessarily going to talk too much about that today, but we will dive into, I think, a lot more of the understanding of its global mission as a whole. Anyway, we'll dive in deep. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Tech Path. Joining me today is Mance Harmon, co-CEO over at Swirlds Labs, co-founder of Hedera. So great to have you back.
Hi, Paul. Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah, we've had you on the show a few times. It's always an interesting conversation, and we're fans of Hedera in general. I look at just the enterprise solutions that you guys are attempting to, really put together with your council members and kind of the overarching strategy. It moves a lot with where the tech industry kind of goes. So kudos to what you guys are doing. I want to jump to a couple of just updates around Q4 metrics. These were publicly reported. A little bit around TVL and network utilization. Can you kind of give me a little bit about what happened in Q4 from you guys?
Yeah, well, it was a really strong quarter. The TVL metrics were up. There's really a mix between the DEXs and the staking platforms. Stater Labs, of course, is the one that's most important there in terms of staking, or most prominent, I should say, in terms of staking. And Saucer Swap has most of the market share in the Hedera ecosystem for DEXs. Those showed strong growth. In terms of other metrics, the network utilization was also up, just the services themselves. There are multiple services. Of course, there is the tokenization service, there's the Hedera consensus service, there's file system, and then the crypto services. Well, and of course, smart contract service that is used by so many folks. And just across the board, it was a really good quarter, and that builds on the prior 3 quarters that were also showing really strong growth. I mean, every quarter. What's interesting to me is that over the period where crypto winter really began to set in, and through this, really deep trough in terms of cycles, Hedera has gone exactly the opposite direction in terms of its usage and TVL, and all the metrics look good.
Yeah, we're going to break that down because we think when we analyze it, obviously the actions on smart contracts, NFTs seem to be one of the strong points of where Hedera is going. You guys obviously had a big presence over at Davos. A little bit about that, because and I've talked to a handful of people who've been at Davos, and this year seemed a little bit lighter on the blockchain front. What was your perception for
Exactly.
global leaders really taking a look at that?
No, that's exactly right. There was a notable decrease in the number of crypto players at Davos this year. We, of course, speculate that that was due to the ongoing bear market and just the general upheaval within the crypto space. But those that did attend were projects with a significant focus on real-world case studies for the technology DLT. And one thing that's notable maybe is that the media remarked on how the overall tone was more pragmatic and less flashy than it had been in the past as it relates to the crypto project. So it was a perfect time for Hedera to have our first major presence there. There were multiple council members that were there with us that were demonstrating their real-world case studies using Hedera, and they were engaged in the conversation. So it was a good experience for us. Again, first time for our being there with major presence in the way that we had, and walked away from it very encouraged.
It's interesting you said that, because that's one of the things that we've kind of looked at, in the essence of when you think about going forward with what's happening in blockchain and crypto in general, obviously Web3 evolutions. It appears that now we're getting a lot more serious discussions. A lot of the, I won't call them scams, but let's just say questionable projects have kind of subsided and weeded themselves out. And it's like any bear market, it kind of cleans itself up a little bit. and you end up finding who the real players are. So kudos to you guys for I think just being present there. I think it still represents well for the industry as a whole, for sure. I want to get into a couple of things. This was, when I look at your website, obviously you guys have done a lot in terms of use cases, a lot in terms of dev development, many new features, I think, within the roadmap itself. But when you look at your roadmap, Mance, over, say, this next 24 months, let's just go to the next 12 months. Is there anything that you think has, really great potential for becoming something special for Hedera? Is there something in there built into that roadmap that is interesting and you think is going to help propel it forward?
Yeah, well, not just for our project, but industry-wide, what the industry has yet to see is a DLT, a layer one, really scale, right?
Yeah.
Scale its ability to process transactions, really high throughput at a price point that is acceptable to the market. And over the next 12 months, we're going to take the next step in terms of going down the path towards true scale. Today, in the network as it exists today, we already have capacity to process 10,000 transactions per second. And that's been there since we launched back in the fall of 2019. And when we published the white paper back in 2018, early 2018, we laid out a roadmap for going from where we really are today with a council, each of the council members running nodes, enabling the initial network to process the transactions it can process today, to then adding in community nodes that are not council members, that are community run nodes. That's coming this year, is the expectation. That's coming this year. Then the next step beyond that is adding additional shards, other networks that contribute to the overall throughput of this overreaching network that is the Hedera network. And that's maybe likely in the next 24 months. So we've knocked out most of the important features that we wanted to, that we said we were going to from the very beginning. The last big piece of this is now scaling up into a fully expansive sharded network that includes community nodes and then ultimately anonymous nodes.
Yeah, on the side, I like the kind of the flow of everything that's happening within Hedera, carbon negative, Solidity contracts. You guys have started going to that direction. Obviously, we've seen that. Now minting NFTs. I'm going to show that actually here in a bit. Migrating, which is the kind of this cross utilization of a variety of networks, and the ability that, back to your point, is the layer one challenges that have hit the market. It's why we see Ethereum and the layer twos doing so well when you look at what's happening with Polygon and others in the layer two crowd that have essentially kind of picked up the baton and worked on the situation, especially around migrating of transactions. Obviously, as we see the NFT market exploding, transaction speed and quantity is a very key aspect. I want to get into a few basic questions on kind of the future here around mostly Web3, but also the partnerships for the Governance Council. Dell, most recent partner.
Sure.
You've got 11 final partners left, and we have some ideas about that we want to talk to you about. But edge computing is kind of Dell's thing. Obviously, that's their enterprise product. But they make a lot of other products too. What about, do you feel that there may be some integration there in Dell's overall business unit, or do you feel like it's just going to fall under the edge scenario?
No, I think there's opportunity to be working with all parts of Dell, and the edge is interesting. That's their initial interest, but we're working with the senior most executives on the tech side for the organization. And they are here with their own ideas. Initially, the edge computing piece of it is what they have identified. But they've said explicitly their goal is to work with us to figure out what the full range of applications can be for Dell and for their customers. And so this one is kind of a mix. Let me just say a word about how new council members have changed over the years. When we first started everything, the council members that we were recruiting, by and large, joined us back in 2019 because they needed to figure out what their use cases might be. It was rare that there was a council member that knew out of the gate exactly what they wanted to do. That's morphed over the years. And today, when new councils come online, when they become council members, it's because they already know or have ideas, specific ideas about what they want to accomplish. But it's also the case that they're learning, right? They're here with us on the front lines, and the council members are working together in what we call the Corporate Utilization Committee to figure out ways in which they might build other products and services that meet their customer demands.
All right, so let's get into, and I agree with you, I think with the Dell application, there's some interesting. What about the future 11 partners? Are there some potentials there that you're targeting right now?
Absolutely. Well, when you say you're targeting, what I want to be clear about is that, so as many people already are aware and understand, we went through a decentralization process of operations. The project, Hedera, was decentralized in its governance very early on. And then over the past 18 months, maybe a little longer than that, Hedera decentralized operations. So what's left in Hedera is basically council operations and governance and that sort of thing. And everything else now is outside of Hedera and exists in the community. That includes Swirlds Labs. And Lehman and I, the founders of Hedera, sit in Swirlds Labs. There is a membership committee in Hedera, and that membership committee is chaired by council members and staffed by council members. They have a list of potential council members that is being worked. I'm not at liberty to say any names, obviously, at this point. But the other thing that maybe is worth noting is that when we spun out, Lehman and I left, and most of the operations left, and we participate in the ecosystem now, continuing to work on the software and other things. When that happened and the membership committee formed, they did a reevaluation of what they considered was required or what the appropriate profile might be of a council member. And they actually, in many ways, raised the bar from what it was before. And it really goes to the heart of wanting council members that can bring real world use cases and can drive network utilization. And there are targets for this year. I mean, the membership committee has set its own internal targets for the number of council members that it wants to bring online this year. And at the same time, the council is large enough that it's functioning appropriately and quite well as a governing body. And so there's not a sense of urgency in that we just can't do the work and it's not legitimate in the way if you only had 5 council members, maybe it would have been.
No, I understand. It brings a lot more people to the table for sure, and at least in terms of ideas and generation around what you guys have done.
I think we're at 28 council members now, and each one of those has a contingency of people that participates. It's quite a large organization at this point.
In looking at that, Mance, this is something that I brought up on the show before in analyzing HBAR and just Hedera as a goal. And you look at the evolution of the council members, the strategic placement of each one of those, if you go all the way back to Avery Dennison, or you look at what's happening here now with Dell, there is an interesting component here because with Hedera, you are relying, I guess, I don't say that you're relying, but the project is relying on the fact that these council members are going to do something, utilize it, get a utility use case going, understand their strategic positioning. And in some cases, when you kind of put that in the hands of others, it can either go really fast, depending on their dedication, or it can go really slow. Based on what you've seen so far, have you guys been pleased with, I mean, just in looking at it from, standing off and saying that the project looks like it's really flourishing, or are there areas that you think a lot of people are saying, hey, we're not there yet, we still don't know how we're going to create utility here?
So, what I can say is that in terms of governance, I think it is world class. I don't think there is another layer one in the market today that comes anywhere close to having a professional governance organization or activity in the way that we do. It's just, there's nothing there that compares. So very pleased about the governance and the council members stepping up to participate and filling the void where it existed. There are committees that are all very active, and and the grand experiment is working, right? It's
Yeah.
generating good results. We didn't know, as you point out, you never really know how this is going to go. It could go really fast, it could fall apart, but it's not the case that there is any, central group of people that are out there driving this. This is a decentralized organization of individual entities, corporates that are collectively governing the platform. So I'm very pleased in that regard. In terms of usage, what we're seeing, we always knew that the enterprise use cases would be slower to come to market than maybe the startups or SMB use cases. And that's been the case. However, what we're seeing is that when they come to market, they come with a wallop, right? I mean, it's exactly what we anticipated, and we're now seeing that in network usage, and the enterprise use cases are maturing to the point where they're beginning to come to market. So yeah, it's been slow. That part of it's been painful, but in terms of positioning and where we are today relative to all of our peers, everything looks great.
Well, it's good because this has been a comparison. I look at another L1 that I feel has a lot of similarities, which is Avalanche. And when we look at Avalanche, kind of their approach to, it's a different kind of system, obviously not a governance system. They're working directly with partners and enterprise solutions, their recent deal with AWS, et cetera. Then you look at Hedera, and it's got the governance council, which can either one, branch a whole new solution set in an industry, whether you look at the computing industry, much like Edge and Dell, but you rely somewhat on, and I say you, meaning Hedera as a decentralized entity, relies
Yeah.
on that governance council to essentially kind of extend it. So it's been I guess the question for me is when you look at use case, utility, it all depends on the power of the players. And that, to your point, is pretty significant with what Hedera has done.
Look at the Masari metrics that have been
Mhm.
driven over the past 3 quarters. The metrics have been fantastic, and it's not council member driven,
Right.
right? It's an important note that the project doesn't depend on the council members for success. It does depend on them for governance, but not for driving usage, although we expect they will drive usage. The numbers have come anyway, right? They are there because of the market at large.
Yeah, for sure. I want to take a break here to thank our sponsors. All right, so I want to thank our sponsor today, and that is iTrust Capital. You guys are looking at maybe long-term investment in Bitcoin. You're thinking, well, I don't want to sell it. I want to be able to put this away, hodl it, and be able to earn money on this. And one of the best ways to do that is through an IRA, and iTrust is the spot to take. A couple of things you can do over on iTrust is you can invest in crypto, you can do your own direction around gold, even silver, all within your IRA. The cool thing, there are no monthly fees. All you do is pay on a per trade basis. It's very easy to get started. And also, one of the biggest things I like about iTrust is the ability to learn about what you can do in these kinds of situations. They do a tremendous job around education, so make sure and check that out. If you want to think about stability in protecting your assets, secure storage, regulated custodian, and then also just the size of what iTrust is doing. 6 billion in transactions, 185K in terms of accounts created, and over 2,000 five-star ratings. This is one of the best ones out there. Make sure and use our link below to get a $100 credit, and you're going to love it. Make sure and do that and help the channel out. And we're back here with Mance Harmon, again from Hedera and Swirlds Labs, I should say, the new deviation from that, obviously in a decentralized world. Mance, I want to continue on in this area, and this is talking about NFTs. If you look at some of the things that have happened out there, you look at this article right here, I think is a good one. NFT volume on Hedera skyrocketing. Even though the market has been down, I still think NFTs have I've said this on the show, I think they've departed from the traditional markets and they have a new use case, much like gaming and entertainment and all the things that NFTs are really starting to find their niche within. With that being the case, and you look at, matter of fact, I wanted to look at this chart right here and just show this. Let me zoom in on this. This was the Masari, back to your point, showing the NFT sector on the growth of Hedera. And you can kind of see here just how much growth has been involved right here in terms of NFT activity. This is pretty significant because it does start to paint the picture for Hedera as being a true NFT platform. Obviously, the strategies that you guys have implemented have really kind of opened up on that. Where do you think this goes for Hedera as a whole?
Well, it's interesting. There are multiple segments that NFTs are going to be really important for. And most of what you see so far is in sort of what I would call the core, so crypto-focused NFT space. There are a lot of
Yes.
gaming companies that are out there. It's also the case that they are that there is a strong number of organizations that are focused on loyalty and rewards that sort of overlaps the gaming space. And if you were thinking of Venn diagrams, you got traditional NFTs associated with gaming, you got loyalty and rewards, and there is an overlap between those two. But then beyond that, NFTs associated with supply chain use cases. I've said this before. I think that in the not too distant future, we are going to live in a tokenized world, meaning that everything you see and touch is going to have an associated digital twin in the form of a token. More often than not, it would be an NFT. And a council member like Atma, Avery Dennison and their Atma application platform that's going to market, that's a supply chain use case that's going to drive billions and billions of NFTs that have nothing to do with sort of the mainstream, loyalty and rewards or gaming aspects of it. So I just think that there's going to be huge growth in the NFT sector generally, and we are well positioned to be making big gains on all fronts and positioned in ways for what I think is going to be the main driver of NFTs that no one else is at this stage, and that is through supply chain.
Well, and you hit on it right there, and this is one of the reasons I'm so bullish on Hedera as a project, and that is the aspect that you've really kind of created these cornerstones of the market. And I shouldn't say created, but the opportunity there for these markets have started to invade in on how to use Hedera as its whole. I was looking at a tweet here introducing Mintbar. This was an open source NFT minter on Hedera. Interesting too, because when we looked at it, I was amazed at how simple this was for creating just a new collection. Going in and minting, literally just flying through the ability to mint a collection quickly. Now, I look at this and I think, wow, if this could happen in a PFP style environment, why couldn't this happen in a supply chain style environment or even other aspects? You go to real estate, medical, I mean, any kind of industry out there, because ease of use, especially around NFT utilization, what we may see in terms of smart contracts, this could really be something very intriguing and interesting.
I agree 100%. And you touched on it there in the last statement. I think that user experience is one of the major limiting factors to mainstream adoption. It's still difficult to participate in the crypto industry if you aren't a true techie, right? We need better UX generally for the industry, and that's coming.
Yeah, well, I think this was a good example of one for sure. But to your
Yep.
point, that ability to really kind of knock down these walls, I think, is going to be critical for mass adoption, and just in general, businesses who because I think we think a little differently here, and on our own media network, we think about these kinds of things all the time. I talk to a lot of other media executives, tech executives, and some of them are moving into blockchain and Web3 and kind of the evolution of what NFTs might mean for them. But a lot of the same questions come into it, and the first and almost foremost issue is always complexity. And if that starts to drill, and it's like this in any new tech. It doesn't matter if you were, at the birth of the internet, birth of mobile, birth of social, all of it usually had, those thresholds to entry that were a little bit higher. So I could definitely see this start to change. I want to jump over to Hashport, because this kind of shows the capability of these EVMs between what's happening with Ethereum. Obviously, you guys are multi-chain agnostic.
Yep.
But when you look at a scenario like this, NFT, porting transactions, et cetera, the ability to move back and forth, hold on one chain, be able to transfer to another chain, all of that is capable within the Hedera Hashgraph system. Is this something that you feel when you talk to other devs that they look at it and say, this is kind of one of the golden jewels of what Hedera is doing?
Well, I think that it's incredibly important for the industry, again, for maturity's sake. Being able to seamlessly move tokens from platform to platform is coming, right? The whole industry is going to solve that problem. Hashport is doing a great job in that regard on Hedera. I think that when we talk about integration, ledger protocols, by and large, that's what's most important, is the easy portability of tokens across the layer ones. That's going to drive growth in lots of aspects of the crypto industry. If you look at the DEXs, for example, today, the DEXs are all siloed, right? There's a problem there in that you can't sort of consolidate or get access to liquidity across the DEXs because the user experience, the user interface just doesn't really exist in being able to access, or not just the UI. I mean, just technically,
Right.
it's very challenging to reach across the walled gardens, as it were, and the industry understands that. That's going to get fixed, I think, in the next few years. There are a lot of projects underway to solve that problem. And we stand to benefit from that in a huge way because we are so efficient in terms of our throughput and cost structure that tokens can move to Hedera and reap all the benefits of the Hedera technology and its governance model. That's only going to be good for us when we have true portability that's seamless across layer ones.
I think it is the nirvana of the entry point of going into mass adoption, because it will make it available for a lot of, enterprise level businesses, as well as just general, when I think about the early stage of what we're seeing with NFTs is mostly in the entertainment, gaming, etc. But I think we're really right there at the precipice of a whole new era of where tokenization will be going. So it's good to see that you guys are in the front driver's seat. On to LG Art Lab. So LG at the Consumer Electronics, we reported on this pretty heavily. Your involvement with LG, Hedera, I should say. And
Yeah.
One, of course, now we're getting into retail, electronic goods. This changes the whole interface of consumers, how they might be looking, utilizing, and even in some cases interacting with NFTs in the future. The visual display that sits in everybody's living room seems to be a big key of this. What are your thoughts about this as we continue to see more migration going into retail electronics?
Yeah, we've been very excited to work with LG. I've had the pleasure of going over there and sitting down with the team at large and speaking with them about their various plans. This is their first foray, as it were, and I think what they're doing is really interesting, and I expect that it will be successful. But by no means is it their only project that is underway, and it's going to be exciting to see how they, as a consumer-focused organization, use the technology for interfacing with their customer base in a way that's difficult. In some ways, it reminds me, well, not strictly speaking, loyalty and rewards. There's a theme here, right? The theme is that the brands, the manufacturers are figuring out how to use DLT generally to interact with their customer base, the consumers, in ways that have not been possible in the past. They also understand, I think increasingly, they understand that the information that they've collected on their customer bases, like for example, if they were using a CRM system, they have some information associated with their customers. That model is now flipping on its head. And the customers are going to be the ones that have all of the relevant information, control of their own information, and the companies like LG and others are figuring out how to create new business models and use the technology in ways so that they have a relationship with the consumer outside of just the moment in time that they walk through their doors and buy a product, right? They have an ongoing relationship with the consumer through their daily lives.
You hit on so many things there, because it's exactly, I mean, if you look at one of the most successful companies in the world that has done that, that's Apple. They've been able to take that kind of consumer electronic experience and just extend it into all facets, to where you get into the Apple ecosystem so deep there's no way out. I feel like, as we sit here with all these Apple products.
Well,
but you're right.
And it's the case that Apple benefits from that today,
yes,
right? And not, I mean, the consumers benefit from the features, but the consumers are going to own it in a fundamentally different way in the future. And it won't be just Apple that benefits from having that kind of reach and insight into consumer behavior. The consumers are going to decide whom they want to share that with. They're going to be in control, and the brands and manufacturers are going to learn how to build new business models around that eventuality.
And I talk to a lot of CEOs within the retail sectors, and this is one of the things that comes up often, is that the decades that we have led up to where we are now, and where we eventually will be going with Web3, is the control center and mechanism of who owns the data, who has access, how they're going to utilize it, all of that, and I talk about this a lot, is that shift has occurred. It's going to fall into the hands of the user and the consumer in all aspects of anything you can imagine. It doesn't matter if it's a retail interface or a B2B interface, it's going to fall in the hands of that. So I think that is the more powerful thing. Much like gaming, you know, if you think about gaming, that's in the hands of the player and how they integrate to it. Sure, the game unit itself and the company behind it has a strategy, and they're trying to implement opportunities there. I want to jump, speaking of gaming, I want to jump to Ubisoft. You guys, of course, did a deal to partner with them on gaming and kind of this next generation, entertainment. And when you look at Ubisoft, this is one of the things that I thought was interesting, because I feel like this needs to be addressed by your governance council soon. I was looking over at Rarible. This was one that this has not gone great for Ubisoft, but I look over there and I look at the blockchain. That's the Tezos blockchain right there where I'm kind of waving my
Sure.
mouse cursor. But my point is this is an easy move now, because it being on the governance council, I think there's an opportunity here for Ubisoft to really kind of extend out into some pretty cool things. And when you look at your area within Hedera's website, you can kind of flow through the different, here's gaming, just some of the sectors in there. I would say with Ubisoft, this is going to explode if they get and come to the table of really integrating Hedera as the blockchain on some of the future projects. So,
well,
governance council, if you're listening in, let's get to work.
Yeah, exactly. But I do want to say one other thing about this. I think that for any mission critical or any application where an enterprise or any organization for that matter really truly depends on its success, and it can't be in a situation where the product that is sitting on top of the L1, for the L1 to go down or have some problem associated. All of the mission critical, enterprise critical use cases ultimately are going to end up being multi-chained, right? I think that we will have council members. We've always thought from the beginning that we'll have council members that are building products and services on top of us. And then just for pure risk mitigation purposes, it's likely the case that they'll end up having a backup, another L1 that works for those same products and services, so that if something happens, they are not dead in the water, right? That just makes common. If I were in their situation,
for
I would
sure,
think
redundancy is it's
that,
it's kind of the mission critical component of any enterprise out there. That in modern day, redundancy is there. You have to do it
there'll
for
be
sure.
a handful of L1s that the world runs on. All major enterprise applications run on. I expect Hedera will be one of those for sure.
Cool. Two last subjects I want to get to. One is the idea of gaming. I look at your strategy here, and we follow your moves, and I say your moves, the council's moves, and the integration of some very key partners. Obviously, Ubisoft. Then you get into what Dell is doing with Edge. Now we're getting into enterprise computing. And then I think about, all right, who could play into that as maybe another governance member and isn't necessarily got a spot yet there. And I look to Netflix. And this is a good example. Here's Netflix's gaming charts on their catalog in terms of downloads. Obviously, back here in their launch, they dropped a bunch of new games, and we see the big spike. But the key here that is interesting to me is that the amount of interest has stayed sustained. So it's likelihood that we're going to see gaming. Already we know that Netflix is a big enterprise platform. They need enterprise services. So I'm just thinking this is a good natural fit, guys. This is a natural
It's a good fit. It's a good fit. I'll take that note.
Put it in there.
Thank you.
All right. Last question to you is obviously about the centralized nature and decentralized nature of all projects out there. The SEC has been doing all sorts of things, and really the thing that it boils down to is, and I think obviously Hedera's moves of decentralization align well, but I look at the classification of HBAR. This is over from your website. Total supply of HBARs may not be modified without the unanimous consent of the members of the Hedera Council. When I look at that, if I don't really dig deep, I think, could this be centralized if the council members are the ones that control this particular capability? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think what's important is to ask the question, centralized compared to what, right? If we want to say, is Hedera centralized compared to Ethereum or Bitcoin or you name the layer one? What matters is how many parties are required to be involved to make fundamental changes to the platform. In our case, we don't have consolidation of that voting power, quote, quote, right? It could be hashing power, however you measure it. Proof of stake account, balances. In Ethereum, a handful of people control enough tokens in their proof of stake system that they can make changes and create problems for the network. In Bitcoin, same thing. Was it fewer than half a dozen miners really control the platform? We are designed to have the most decentralized governance model in terms of the number of people that are required to participate in the governance itself, the number of people that have to vote in order to make changes, both at a sort of a business level, governance perspective, as well as a technology level and the ordering of the transactions. It's just a fallacy for people to think that because there are 28 organizations today growing to 39 that are required to participate, that somehow that is more centralized than the handful that really control Ethereum and Bitcoin. It's just not true.
Well, I think you're right. I think the scenario is, as lawmakers and we do start to get some alignment with some sort of regulatory, boundaries that would be put forth in blockchain, these kind of questions are going to come up, and also these kinds of resolute scenarios are going to come up as well, to your point, both on Bitcoin and Ethereum. So I
There's
would
one
agree
other
with
thing,
you.
one other point I would like to make. When we started this, there was no such thing as a DAO, right? If you look at how DAOs are organized, at least in Wyoming's case, it's based on LLC law. And what we've done, yes, Hedera is an LLC, but if you look at the bylaws are written in such a way that before there were DAOs, we created a DAO. And we don't call the Hedera Council a DAO, but functionally, it is the same. And it's designed to ensure that decentralization stays in place in ways that the other layer ones simply haven't been able to achieve.
Mance, within the council itself, and you look at the weighting capacity, whether it's on how and what these individual council members can and cannot do, is there any potential risk of one council member or multiple council members becoming overweighted within the ecosystem of what Hedera is as a whole?
There's not. I mean, and that goes to the way that we structured the governance from the very beginning. Each council member has one vote. And for, say, for example, if we're going to make changes to the code base, we're making an update to mainnet, for example, each council member ends up signing a transaction. That effectively is their vote that they want to make the said changes to the code base. Well, there's no single council member that can overrule the other council members, right? It still requires 2/3 of the council voting affirmatively to make that change. And in addition, even if it's not technically possible, we of course recognize that influence can sometimes grow across council members. You know, you have a council member that's been around for a long time. Their influence over other council members perhaps would grow as well. Because of that dynamic, we implemented a part of the bylaws that say that the council members can't stay council members forever. They can serve for up to 2 terms, 3-year terms, for a total of 6 years, and then they're out, so that new blood comes in, as it were, and new council members, and we mitigate any kind of undue growth or consolidation of influence across council members in that way as well.
Mance Harmon, always fun talking with you and learning. In many cases, I kind of get a chance to get Hedera in an MBA. It feels like every time I get a chance to speak with you. So thanks so much for stopping in today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. It's good to be here.
You bet. All right, so you guys are tuned in maybe over on our podcast side of things right now. Make sure and jump over here to the YouTube channel. This is where you're going to catch a lot of more of our deep dives, and a lot of what Mance and I just discussed really kind of showcases on just some of the visuals that we provided to you. So YouTube, just search Paul Barron Network, you'll find us. Make sure also and get in on the Diamond Circle. We've got a brand new Substack out there. Just jump over to it. It's PBN3 Substack.substack. You'll find us, and you can join for free. It's very easy. We do breakdowns, analysis. We use our own CPI, which is our crypto power index, sentiment tools, where we analyze a lot of projects. And we have a custom podcast only available on Diamond Circle Plus, which is part of this program. So make sure and join in on that. If you guys want to reach me, it is out there on Twitter at Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.